The House is resumed. Tēnā koutou te nākwa e te whori, inga iwi, inga reo, inga hawe wha. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Shalom. That's a new one. Honourable members, here we are. I have to call on government orders of the day numbers 1 and 2.
Subantarctic Islands Marine Reserves Bill, Committee Stage. Airports Cost Recovery for Processing of International Travellers Bill, Committee Stage continued.
I declare the House in committee for consideration of the Subantarctic Islands Marine Reserves Bill and further consideration of the Airports Cost Recovery for Processing of International Travellers Bill. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Speaker. Members, the Housing Committee on the Subantarctic Islands Marine Reserves Bill and the Airports Cost Recovery for Processing International Travellers Bill. A point of order, Jamie Lee Ross.
Mr. Chair, I seek leave for all clauses in the Subantarctic Islands Marine Reserves Bill to be taken as one question.
Leave is sought for all provisions to be taken as one question. Is there any objection? There is no objection. Therefore, we first turn to the Subantarctic Islands Marine Bill. The question is, the clauses 1 to 11 and schedules 1 to 3 stand part.
Mr. Chairman.
The Honourable Ruth Dyson.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, and can I first of all express my disappointment to our agreement to not having this bill taken as 11 separate parts, and say that that would have provided us with a lot of opportunity to discuss in depth the matters within this bill, but we agreed to it, to having it as one part, because we agreed to the bill. It's a very good bill. It extends the marine protection for 3 of the Subantarctic islands, the Antipodes, the Bounty and Campbell Island. I've had the pleasure of going to Campbell Island, not the other 2 yet, and I want to say that having the whole of Parliament, which is what I expect in the third reading, agree to these provisions is a very good message to future travellers in there. Mr. Chairman, I also want to extend my congratulations to the Minister who's sitting in the chair. He's recently been appointed again as a Minister, and I want to acknowledge that and congratulate him. He's Associate Conservation, I guess, in the capacity currently in the chair, amongst other things, or perhaps because other ministers had urgent matters of public business to attend to rather than coming to the House.
Short straw.
I actually think that it's very good, having the Minister been recently appointed, that his first task is to shepherd through a bill which has the support of the entire House of Parliament. So I think that's a good step to it. There are a few issues that I want to raise, and one of it's actually manners, Mr. Hipkins. I don't know what's happened to the younger generation. In my day, we would have thought that was just good form and manners, but I don't know these young ones today. Mr. Chairman, to a serious note though, the primary issue that I want to raise in my initial contribution on this bill is a matter that's raised in the interpretation clause 3, which looks at the role that the Minister of Conservation has, but also looks at the role that the Minister for Primary Industries have. And I think that in this bill, the tension that exists in other examples isn't so bad. But in other examples, it has provided a dysfunctional process and a very flawed outcome. Let me give you 2 examples. The first one is in an area that I think the government should have absolute shame, and that is the lack of application of the precautionary principle when it looked at provisions for protecting the Maui's dolphins. There are only 55 Maui's dolphins left, not just in the North Island, not just in New Zealand, but on the planet. 55 adult Maui's dolphins in total left. But when the Minister of Conservation had the job of looking at extended protection, 21,000 submissions were made on those proposals, and every single one of them, half a dozen exceptions to be truthful, nearly every single one of them wanted exceptional caution to be applied and widespread protection given to the Maoris dolphins territorial area. Things like where the Maoris crossed Cook Strait, where they settled in the inner harbour, where they were clearly going out beyond the nautical miles that are in the current provisions. And the Minister of Conservation was not able to adopt what those overwhelming number of submissions said. He wasn't able to do that because he was tripped up by the need to make that decision with the Minister of Fisheries. Unfortunately, just at the current time, but only until the beginning of October, when we have a new government elected, the current Minister of Fisheries doesn't have a lot of confidence or vision, let alone a bold approach to the future of the fishing industry. That's a very good question. Mr. Guy is his name.
I thought it was Phil Heatley.
No? Oh, yes, it might be Phil Heatley. So the Minister for Primary Industries, the Minister for Fisheries, does not have a bold vision, let alone the courage to put forward a new approach to take the fishing industry not just into the future, but into a much better future. We had the opportunity through that process for the Minister of Conservation and the Minister of Fisheries to come out with a solution that was a win-win for everyone. A win-win for the Maoris dolphins, which we could have saved, and now is in real risk of being extinct within our lifetime, Mr. Chairman.
The Honourable Ruth Dyson.
We had an opportunity to have a real victory for the fishing industry, and we had a real opportunity for a major victory for New Zealand. Just imagine the marketing opportunity if the New Zealand fishing industry was able to say, we fish New Zealand waters in a sustainable way. Just imagine the pride that the Minister of Conservation could have had if he had been able to say, we've done every single thing possible to save the Maoris dolphins, but oh no, we'll just tinker at the edges. The fishing industry are unhappy because they've lost a bit of their fishing. The Maoris dolphins remain critically threatened, and our fishing industry is in danger of being subject to a boycott. The people who buy New Zealand products from overseas are more and more looking at the labels. They want to know where the produce was grown or where it was caught, what manner was it produced, what manner was it harvested. And if they see that fish was caught in New Zealand waters and threatened the Maoris dolphins, they're going to say, to heck with that, we'll buy our fish from somewhere else. That is a lose-lose situation, and in the interpretation clause of this bill, it is exactly the same lack of clarity about whose job it is to make the proper decision, and I think that's a fundamental flaw. The other example where that joint decision-making creates a tension which is unable to be resolved sensibly is the example that I used in earlier debate, and that is the proposal by the Hawke's Bay Regional Council to build a dam in Ruataniwha.
That's nothing to do with this.
It actually is, Mr. Chairman, in regard to the joint decision-making in the interpretation clause of this, which was between the Minister of Conservation and the Minister of Primary Industries. And in the Ruataniwha Dam proposal, it's a joint decision-making process between the Minister of Conservation again and the Minister for the Environment. Unless you have clear leadership from one minister with a vision about what is proposed, you will end up with the total mess that we have in Hawke's Bay. Actually, if the dam goes ahead, we will have more of a mess. The Tukituki River is at risk of being turned toxic because of the model they are using in that dam proposal. So this is the only concern that I have with the provisions in this legislation. The bill itself, offering better marine protection in the Subantarctic, is excellent, but having the joint decision-making, which is another legislation, in here slightly weaker by the requirement to consult with the Minister for Primary Industries, I think is a fundamental flaw. The government should decide that if something is worth protecting in a marine reserve or a national park or in Schedule 4 or on conservation land, then it should be protected. That should be the message, that should be the bottom line, and that should be the process that is set out in regulation and legislation. This is another example where the government can't quite get it right, tries to have $1 each way, and I think ends up giving unclear messages to the sector, which is foolish and unfair, particularly if it's given to the business community, but also means we are less likely to have that vision of protection of some of the most pristine and important waters in our jurisdiction offered to the fullest extent. So, in my view, that tension is something that should be avoided. We should go back or go forward to a time where the Minister of Conservation has a clear mandate to be an advocate for conservation, to be an advocate for better marine protection, and not for that advocacy or vision to be watered down by any responsibility to consult. Mr. Chairman, I just want to conclude by saying that it's always good to see marine protection supported. New Zealanders have a very strong affinity with the sea. We're surrounded by it. We're an island at the bottom of the world. We love the protection. We want to enhance the quality of our water that goes to the sea. Hopefully we'll be able to do that through other legislation that's not yet before the House. But in this particular instance, it will be a pleasure to cast our vote alongside the government, and I know every other party, in support of this bill.
I call Gareth Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kia ora, ngā mihi nui kia koutou kia ora. It's a great privilege and a pleasure to rise to speak in support of this bill.